Hello and welcome to my channel. So, I'm finally doing it. I've been a booktube fan for years and years. I think I've started watching Check Out With videos back in, I don't know when, and recently I've just been obsessed. Yeah, basically since end of last year. And yeah, so I thought maybe someone might be interested in getting a bit more recommendations and everything, and yeah, I don't really know what my type of genre would be, like the genre that I lean towards. I guess it's romance, but I read all genres really, and well, today I want to talk about my favourite reads from this year so far. It's the only books that I've given 5 stars so far. And I've read, how many books have I read so far? I don't know, I'm a bookaholic these days. I think I've read 75 books so far. And so I think there are 9 books here that I have rated 5 stars, and I just want to share them with you, and maybe some of you might want to pick them up yourself. Okay, so I thought I'd do this chronologically, so just start with the first book in 2023 that I rated 5 stars, and that's Cecilia Ahern's Ahern? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but I really love her. So this is the first book I've read of her, and this is How to Fall in Love. I think there's also like a different version with a different title, but well, I just know this title. So, and this was just a stunning book. I mean, she's kind of known for her like fairy tale-esque romance novels, and I went into this thinking it would be like a cheesy romance, but it really wasn't. It was just, I've never read such a unique romance. Well, maybe I have by now, but it was just first time I read something that was just so incredibly touching and deep, whilst also being a romance, because it goes into like topics such as like suicide and depression and how to find happiness in your life when you're not happy with your job, and I just thought it was incredible. So this is about Christine Rose, who one day she sees a guy standing on the bridge in Dublin, and she prevents him from jumping, and makes a deal with him to try and get him to change his mind about about taking his life. And so he gives her 2 weeks to change his mind, and she's just trying to help him find happiness again, or content. And I just thought it was beautiful, because it also like shows how helping others also helps yourself, and I just thought it was stunning. Then the next book I rated 5 stars is a historical fiction fantasy kind of book, and this is Hex by Jenni Fagan. And this, I think I found out about this book through Jack Atwood's book channel. I'm not quite sure. I think he said that he wanted to read it. I think he's read it by now. But anyway, and I just thought that this is exactly my type of book, because I love medieval history and women's history. I mean, this is set in the early modern period. So this is set at the end of the 16th century. And oh my god, I can't talk anymore. It's about Gaelic Duncan, who you might have heard of if you're into history. She was a Scottish woman who got accused of witchcraft at the end of the 16th century. She was hanged. And this book is kind of like set in her last night in the prison cell that she was kept in, and she's visited by a familiar, which is a woman from our time, a modern period, and she visits Gaelis in the cell. I think her name's Iris, and I think she's a shapeshifter in this sense. So this is the fantasy aspect, but it's really about like women's struggle throughout history, like how women nowadays are still like suffering and experiencing inequality, rape and everything. and it's just a stunning, heartbreaking, and yeah, just really touching book. I got goosebumps at the end, and I think I couldn't really do anything for half an hour afterwards. I remember exactly where I read it. I read it in a Cafe Nero in town, and I read it within an hour because it's quite short. I think it's got like, how many pages? Like 130 or something? Oh, not even. It's 100 pages. And so it's a really quick read. And yeah, it just leaves you speechless. I just think it's incredible. It's so sad and so tragic, but also so powerful. Yeah. So anyway, this is the second book. Highly recommend. So my third 5-star read is also like a historical fiction book, but a bit more modern, and this is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. And yeah, it's about modern history of Cyprus and kind of like the war that the British kept on throughout the 20th century. I didn't know about this before I read it, and I thought it was really like shocking because Cyprus itself is like a divided, I don't know if it's still divided, I think there is still like a division, but it's like less violent now, but because a big, like half of the population is Greek and the other half is Turkish, and then there's also like differing religions, like with being Christian and with being Muslim, and it's just a really stunning book about this modern part of violent history that people rarely ever think about. I mean, I didn't know about it, so I'm like part of the problem. And I read it and I thought it was stunning. Like, I feel like the most unique aspect for me, and probably for everyone reading this book, to be honest, is the fact that like half of the chapters are written from the perspective of a fig tree. And so it's because, well, the father of the main protagonist, I mean, I don't really know if it's the main protagonist, but there's like a teenage girl who lives in London nowadays, and she's experiencing this like transgenerational trauma. And her father came to London in the 90s or 70s. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be 90s or early 2000s even. And he brought a fig tree with him from Cyprus. So this fig tree has like experienced and seen everything that the father, his name's Costas, I think, yeah, went through and like experienced, and like the parents' relationship of the child, who's called Ada, I believe. Yeah, so it was just really unique to read from the perspective of the tree, who's actually like also, who's got very strong feelings for the dad. And I thought it was just really interesting, especially nowadays where there's so much research and still so much needed research into like the abilities of plants and like in how far they can maybe feel. Because I mean, there's so much research, especially about like mushrooms, with these like huge underground connections. Yeah, so I just thought it was really fascinating, and I would highly recommend. So the fourth book I read this year and rated 5 stars is a bit different. It's Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, and I actually also read well, I found out about Dolly Alderton because everyone's talking about Everything I Know About Love, and I read that one, and I thought it was a decent book, but I wasn't stunned by it. But then I read this one. I read this one first, I think, and I thought it was beautiful. I just loved it so much. It presents life in a really realistic way. Like, this is about Nina, who's I think she's turning 30 or 31 in this book, and I think it's like, yeah, I think this book takes place within like a year. So like it starts with her 30th birthday and finishes with her 31st or something like that. So it's about like what it's like to be a single woman in our modern society, and the struggles and like concerns and questions that you just ask yourself, like what there might be wrong with yourself, and even though there isn't, but like just you know, the self-consciousness that we all experience. And just reading this as someone who's also single, just like, I've related so much to this, and it just resonated with me so deeply. All the characters were so amazingly round and deep and complex, and also the relationships that the narrator has with her girlfriend is just so stunning. Like, one instance I just laughed out loud, and I was at the airport, and it was just so well written, because it was about when Nina finds out about like a friend who got like ghosted or cheated on. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, like how she reacted was just, I wished more than anything that I could buy a Durex for her heart. And it's just so funny and touching at the same time, like a Durex for her heart. Like, who even like comes up with that? It's just, I loved it. And then next up, also very different to Ghosts now, is a non-fiction book actually, and this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And I read this because I just want to read more about like women's experiences and throughout time. And I mean, like most of you probably know that this is about a very famous like sexual abuse, not so, the sexual assault case in America in 2015, 16, something like that. And it was heartbreaking. It was truly shocking and sad and tragic, and it broke me, but it was also just so powerful, and I absolutely loved it. And it took me a while to get through it, I'm not gonna lie. Like, sometimes I could read books within a day, but this one I think took me like 4 days, because it is heavy, but I just loved it so much. And it captures the feelings and thoughts, because I mean, it's written by herself. Like, this is written by Chanel Miller, the victim of a sexual assault case in America, who got assaulted whilst being unconscious. So definitely read the trigger warnings for this. But it was just heartbreaking. But I'm really glad I read it, and yeah. And then it's also just how this case, because it's basically also about how she's trying to get get her case through the law system in America, and how it's really difficult to get the law to see the like traumatic impact that the sexual assault has on the victim, and how it impacts the victim's life so heavily, like basically for her whole life, and how this is often disregarded. It's just so frequent, and it happens to so many people. Like, every second woman says that she has had an instance in her life when she didn't want to, and was kind of like either forced or pushed to doing something that she didn't want to do. And I don't know how high the statistics are for men, but I'm sure they're also quite considerable. And so I think this is just a really important book for everyone to read. And yeah, if you're alright with reading about traumatic experiences, because yeah, trigger warnings, read the trigger warnings. Okay, and then next up we've got another romance, but it's also a unique one, and it's Nick Hornby's Just Like You. I'd never read anything by Nick Hornby before, but I'd seen the movie versions of About a Boy and A Long Way Down, which I really loved, because I feel like, same as Cecilia Ahern, his novels feature romance, but they're not just romances, they're like deeper than that. And because this book is about a relationship between a mother of 2 children who's in her 40s and a black student who babysits for her. and they start having feelings for each other, and it's just about their struggles with like racism and like just being judged, and also their own like concerns and like self-consciousness about like whether this could work because the age difference and then also the cultural difference, and but they've got these strong feelings and how to overcome them and everything. And it's just, I absolutely loved it. I love reading unique romances. I read loads of cheesy romances, don't get me wrong. I read loads of terrible romances and I still enjoy them, but yeah, I rarely ever give them 5 stars, and this one definitely deserved 5 stars. Yeah. Okay, so next up is another historical fiction book that my mum was begging me to read for ages, and I finally got around to reading it, and this is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Funnily enough, like, it is about like the Second World War, but it's written by a Canadian author, but it's just so realistic, and like the research that he must have done is just really, really incredible. And so this is basically, like, it's written from several perspectives, but it mainly revolves around 2 characters. Marie-Laure, who's a French girl living in France. I think, well, it starts out like she starts out living in Paris with her dad, but during the war, like in 1940, she moves to the countryside, I think toward the coast, in like a smaller town. I don't remember what it's called, but like she's blind. She's always been blind, and it's about her relationship with her dad, and then also her great uncle, I believe, or is it just granddad? I'm not sure, but like it's about her relationship with her family and then other people. It's also really fast paced because all the chapters are really short. You cannot see this, but they are really short, so it's fast paced, and like the POV changes with every chapter. So I guess like a third or a bit more than a third of the chapters are written from her perspective. And what's really stunning is how she, her dad makes a model of Paris and the city where she moves to during the war. She practices how to get from one place to the next by moving her hands through the streets on the model and then counting the steps on the actual street, and just like how she's able to move around and be independent whilst also being blind. And it was just so mesmerizing. I just loved it. And and the other half or third of the book is written from Werner's perspective, who's a boy from Germany, and he gets drawn into this military scene where he doesn't even want to be, and he's just kind of like forced into it because he wants to he's really good with like technology and radios, and he kind of like the military people in Germany find out about his skills and ask him to repair radios and everything, and then he's just drawn into it and ends up being like in a troop that goes through, I think they drive through Russia first to like, and with his radio skills they find out where like the enemies are, where the enemies are, and they go there and take them out. And it's just it's just really, really moving how he just doesn't want to be there, but he ends up being there. And there's also about how he hears, how like as a child he used to listen to this podcast from the French person, which is the great granddad of Marie-Laure, and then suddenly when his troop gets to France, he starts hearing that voice again, because the great granddad, no, great uncle, you know what I mean, starts broadcasting things again, and he starts hearing that voice again and instantly knows that it's the voice that he listened to as a child with his sister. And yeah, I don't want to say too much. I've already been talking way too long. Anyway, so it's stunning. It sounds like it's a heavy book, but it really isn't. That's also what my mum said, and I was like, "Are you sure? I don't really want to read anything heavy now." And she was like, "It's really fast paced, and it really isn't that tragic. I mean, it is tragic, but like, it's not like it's really like heavy read. It's more of a lighter and not really light, but it's not a heavy read. Anyway, that's all I can say. Yeah. Next up, we've got a really light-hearted, cozy romance, and that's a graphic novel, which is Heartbreaker. Not Heartbreaker. Oh my god, it's called Hardstopper. I am stupid. Yes, Heartstopper, which all of you will have probably heard of, because I mean, ever since the Netflix series, it's just been everywhere. And I actually started watching the Netflix series last year, and I wasn't convinced. I didn't finish it. I might have to re-watch it now. But I had to read this novel for uni, and it's a graphic novel, and so I read it, I think, within an hour or so, and it was just so cute. I absolutely loved it. So it's about these two boys, whose names I have forgotten. Charlie and I don't know what the other guy's name is. Yes, anyway, it's about these two boys who like start having a really like Charlie is like he's been openly gay for a while, whereas the other boy, whose name I sadly forgot, isn't sure about his sexuality yet, and it's just a really, really like sweet little romance, and just about like first love and finding your about your sexuality, and it's just such a cozy, sweet read, and yeah, deserved 5 stars. Okay, the last one that I gave 5 stars is actually a book that I finished yesterday, and that is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. And I actually read this because, yeah, again, because of Jack Hackworth's. He recommended it on his book channel. I think he also gave it 5 stars, and I read it yesterday. I found it in a charity shop the other week, and I thought, okay, that's a sign. I need to buy it, like for £2. Count me in. Take my money. I spend way too much on books. You know the thing. So I read this yesterday, and it's such an atmospheric book. Like, Claire Keegan, like, her writing style is just so atmospheric. Like, the way she writes about like scenes. This is also a historical fiction book. It's about the 70s, I think, in Ireland, and it's about the main protagonist is Bill Furlong. He's a coal and timber merchant, and it's about the time before Christmas, and he just his thoughts, and you learn so much about his character within like 110 pages or so, and it's just so deep and hopeful and sweet and touching whilst also being sad. It was just stunning, and I just loved the way that she set the scene and wrote about the environment. Like, I think on page 2, yeah, that's page 2, I underlined a sentence about like just the weather, which is, and then the nights came on, and the frosts took hold again, and blades of cold slid under the doors and cut the knees off those who still knelt to say the rosary. Yeah, it's just, I really loved it. Definitely want to read her other books. And that's it. These were all the books that I gave 5 stars this year so far. So these are my favourite reads. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, look forward to making some more videos.